Let's begin. We are on 12b1. 12b1, bottom. Vayomer hamelech lachachamim. And the king said to his wise men. Where are we cutting in now? We're cutting in. Let me just give you, close the door if that's okay. We are coming in right now at the point where the king talks to his wise men. Why is he talking to his wise men? He's just had this meltdown where he's asked Vashti to come in wearing the crown to tell the people who from Persia and from Media, the nicest and the most beautiful women don't come from your country or from your country. My wife is the most beautiful woman in the entire kingdom. And, welcome back. And is, And is neither from Persia nor Media. She is from Bavel. She is Chaldean. Okay? If that's the case, they said, so bring her. Let's see. We'll figure it out. We'll see. Anyway, she has this explosion of either leprosy or a vestigial limb or whatever the case is, and she cannot come, even though she really would have liked to. She humiliates him and he gets very angry. What does she say to him specifically? Stable boy of my father could drink the wine of 1,000 people and never get drunk, and you, after just a couple of drinks, look at you lost your mind. You're already calling for me to come in, naked to show me off to your friends. Okay? He gets fuming mad. What does he do? He calls his wise men to deal with the problem. Ask the Gemara, who are these wise men that the king calls? Man chachamim rabbanan. That refers to the rabbis. Why would he reach out to the rabbis? What's the logic there? To reach out to the rabbis over anyone else? And how do we know that chachamim actually means rabbis? Says the Gemara, Yode'eh ha'itim, because the pasuk says he reached out, he called to his chachamim. Yode'eh ha'itim, those that know the times. Now that's a very strange and specific expression that's used in the Torah, specifically with regards to the chachamim that know how to calculate the Kiddush HaChodesh and to ensure that the calendar actually matches the solar calendar. So let's kind of take a quick review for this on what this means. There are 354 days in the lunar calendar, 365 in the solar calendar. What that means is that as you're adding and subtracting and the months are moving and forward and backward, you have to make sure that the lunar calendar aligns with the solar. Why? Because many of the months are given along agricultural markers. Chag HaAsif, the holiday of the ingathering. Chag HaAviv, the holiday of the spring. So if you had a situation where the days came off, they need to understand the trajectory of the stars, of the sun, of the moon, etc., in order to be able to interpolate those days and make sure that those days kind of would come together and match up. So those who called, that was a specific set of specific kind of skills that they needed in order to be able to match up these two things. And therefore, at that moment, we call them in the Torah, Yode'eh ha'itim, those who know the times. So the Torah understood that, the Gemara understood this was a throwback to that expression in the Pasuk, and therefore it says, he called out to his Chachamim, Yode'eh ha'itim, the ones that know the times, he called them and he asked them what to do. They knew how to set the month and as well add the leap year into the calendar. Amalei, he said, Dainu hali, please, if you would please take over and rule on this case, could you become judge, jury, and executioner? Amru hechina avid. They said, one rabbi said to the next, you joking? If we tell her to kill her, what's going to happen? In one more day, however soon he's going to sleep it off, and then what's going to happen? He's going to ask, what'd you do to my wife? You killed her? Didn't you know I was drunk? And he'll murder them all. So what are they going to say instead? Okay, they're going to say, Nema le shavka. Okay, you know what? Safer, tell him to leave it. What's the problem? She was mizalzel, she humiliated the crown. And therefore, when he gets sober and he realizes that we let his wife get away with humiliating him, what will he say? The kingdom, the honor of the king is not important in your eyes, and he'll kill us. So we die either way. Amrulo, what they say, from the time the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, and we were exiled from our lands, nitla etzah mimenu. We no longer were able to come up with the correct etzah, advice for people. We don't know how to rule the laws of nefashot, to rule on cases of life and death. Go to the countries of Ammon and Moab that were not exiled from Israel like we were. They're living on the same land that they were living on before. And they in the fact that they are settled and that they've not been banished from their lands, they are like wine that sits on top of the sediment of the grapes, and therefore it's able to kind of age and mature properly. Not only that, by the way, if you take the sediment of wine and you move it around, what happens if you move the glass around, the wine around? The wine becomes cloudy, it's pieces in it, it becomes sour and acidic, right? So wine that sits properly, stored properly, produces beautiful wine. Wine that's moved around is going to be impossible to drink. So therefore, wine, which always represents chokhmah, our wine is mixed up, and therefore we can't rule on your case. Were the rabbis lying?
Yes.
No.
Playing it safe.
Okay.
Were they telling the truth?
No.
No. Were they allowed to rule different din nefashot? They didn't have a bet din. They didn't have a sanhedrin, so they couldn't. It's true. Nitla, we had etzah taken away from us. Is that true? That they can no longer give good etzot? True or not true?
No.
True. When it came to the party,
You're not doing well.
when it came to the party, the Jews asked the Chachamim whether or not they should go. What do all the Chachamim say? Yes. Who told them not to go?
Mordechai.
Only Mordechai. What does that tell you?
No judgment.
That they did not have the power of etzah that they used to have. In fact, the Gemara relates that when Nebuchadnezzar saw the prophet crying over the temple, right? He asked him, what are you crying about? It's the sticks and stones. So at the time, prophet? I think it was a prophet, I don't remember. It might have been one of the sages. Either way, point is, one of the great philosophers was making fun of him. It's not becoming of a wise man to be crying over a building. So he said to him, you're a philosopher, you probably have many questions. Ask me whatever questions you want. He asked him his deepest philosophical questions, the conundrums that he could not work out for his life. And the rabbi answered every one of his questions like this. He said, wow, where was such wisdom from? He said, my wisdom was from those sticks and stones. That's why I'm crying. So the Chachamim were not lying when they said that etzah was taken away from them, their wisdom that they had, that was being drawn from the Beit HaMikdash, it was no longer there. It was no longer with them.
Lying.
They were lying and they were not lying.
They were lying. You know
Good.
why? Because they showed up to the party thinking that was the right reason. They
Okay.
didn't think that they lost their etzah, their ability to reason.
No, but the point is that it turns out, now they see, right? Now they're on hand at the scene of the crime. Had they stayed home, what would have happened? None of this would have went down. They realized immediately they should have listened to Mordechai. You know who didn't get asked what to do with Vashti? Right. Mordechai. Okay? Let's move on.
I have a question.
Good one.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Achashverosh asked Jewish rabbis what to do?
Yes.
Why would
Again,
he do that?
you must remember, we spoke about this a couple of times. You have kings of the world deciding what and what not to do based on Pesukim. 70 years, it says it doesn't matter. They respected 1,000,000% this Jewish God that they knew had killed Belshazzar. Often in one night, had miraculous handwriting on the wall. That night he's dead. So they all were very, very cognizant of the pasuk. When Koresh comes to power, what does he say? God put me in the. Who talks like that? The answer is, at that moment in history, they were able to clearly see the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to the point where the kings themselves were terrified and everything they did was calculated, until the point where they said, if your God abandoned you, he's no longer coming back. You realize they never said your God doesn't exist. I could use the vessels of the Beit HaMikdash because he said in 70 years he's going to rebuild it. He didn't rebuild it. Obviously, he's moved on.
Is that why Achashverosh felt okay giving Haman the go-ahead to wipe out the Jews?
Correct.
Because the 70 years passed?
He obviously doesn't care about them.
Right.
Not only that, the Chachamim explain that he also, Achashverosh, wanted the Jews to come to the party. The Midrash says, Elohim shel ele soneh zimah. The God of these, he hates adultery. Let's get him to come, like we talked about earlier with Vashti, to this orgy. They'll all sin, and once they sin there, God will abandon them.
Were they participating in that debauchery?
It doesn't say specifically so, but it also tells us that they were there and that they were punished and they deserved to die because they went to the party. So we gave one explanation why, even if they did nothing wrong, how going to the party was treacherous and treasonous. Right? We talked about how the celebration of the destruction of the temple and and the fact it would never be rebuilt, that was enough to be able to kind of draw that thing.
Do they feel like they could become God's people?
Who? Achashverosh? I don't know. Again, because we don't find that there's people angling for that position. Either because they know of the price that it exacts when you don't do the right thing, or it's because it's a continuation of the same no that they gave God at Shavuot, when God says, "You want my Torah?" and they're like, "No, no thanks. Too much restriction."
Were they idolaters? They were idolaters.
Who?
Achashverosh and Kurosh.
Haman wears around his neck an idol.
No, but Haman is a different story because he was a Malachite. But them,
He was a Amalekite, but he was the man that Achashverosh appointed over the entire kingdom.
but
If it was a different deity, he would not have done so.
they were in the history of Persia, old Persia.
Yeah.
They were Zarathustrians. They were
Zoroastrians.
Zoroastrians. They
Yeah.
were believing God with this book and prophet and everything.
Zoroastrian doesn't mean you're not idol worshippers.
They were.
It doesn't mean that you're not an idol worshiper. It just means that your idol is not a statue. If you bow to the sun, or if you bow to the stars, that's also idol worship. So Zoroastrians didn't have statues per se,
They had a fire.
but they had the elements.
Elements.
Right. So that's idol worship.
I met a Zoroastrian 2 years ago. I couldn't believe it. I was like, wow.
Yes.
Okay.
I never heard of the term.
Really.
Yeah.
It's a famous, ancient,
And their whole claim to fame is we're the oldest religion.
very old religion. By the way, some people say that Zoroastrian is what's referred to as Molech. And they would sacrifice their children by passing them into the fire. And that was because they worshipped
Even now,
fire.
Even now
Okay?
they do it. The last Wednesday of the new coming year of the Persians, Farsin they call it. They base in Iran and India now. They pass through the fire.
They pass through, but they don't kill the child.
No, they pass as
No, it used to be that they would kill the child as well. Yeah. And by the way, the Pasuk says that both are forbidden. That means that was a current practice at the time. It says that they're not to put it into the fire, but it also says, Lo ta'avir, don't pass your child through the fire in order to, okay. Let's move on. By the way, again, it would track as well if the Babylonians were Zoroastrian, who the Persians and the Medes took over, because that would have been why Nebuchadnezzar would stick Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah into a furnace of fire. It wasn't a random punishment. Okay? Although there are other Gemarot that would seem to contradict that based on the fact that there was a golden statue, which doesn't seem to be Zoroastrian. Okay, let's carry on.
It says these rabbis know about the calendar and they set all the timing.
Yeah.
Didn't they calculate the 70 years and know that it's too short and they shouldn't go in?
What we're referring to over here is in terms of the months and in terms of the calendar setting, not necessarily how you would count the 70 years. All right? And by the way, even if they did know, Achashverosh wasn't asking them. All right? Let's move on. The Gemara says, so this is what they did. So they were able to extricate themselves from that situation. Vitama amrule, and the reason that they told him, Tichtiv sha'anan Moav min urav v'shoketu al shemarav, right? That Moav is relaxed, it's chilling from the time that from its youth, and it is relaxed to al shamarav. What does shemarav mean? Shemarav means the sediments, the pieces of the olives or the grapes. In this case, the grapes that they're sitting on. It wasn't empty from vessel to vessel. It didn't go into exile. So if that's the case, they're the ones that you should ask. Therefore, the taste of Ammon and Moab stayed all these years. And their smell, lo namar, has never changed. So the pasuk that is quoted supports this concept that the Chachamim was saying, like, go ask them. And that the idea that if a person is moved from place to place, that they lose their sense of security and therefore their ability to have a clear head. Where do we have that? Verecho lo namar. Just a quick Pismonim test. No, nobody? Recho lo namar. It's a pasuk we just read. Alken, right? Amad ta'amo bo verecho lo namar. Jonah? No? Yasad besodo. You familiar with the song? Recholo namar ledagevu lam baruch she'amar vehaya olam. Pismon that was written by Rabbi Yosef Karo, the one who wrote the Shulchan Aruch. Okay, I don't know if he wrote the tune, but he wrote the words. Okay, let's go. I write the music and I write the song. Okay, miyad, immediately. What do we see after this? Right away after he gets this advice from the Chachamim that they tell him we can't involve ourselves. What does he do? He now turns to his next source of advice, V'akarov elav, and the ones that were closest to him. The Gemara over here does not list all of them. Kashena shetar admata tarshish, meres marsena, and memuchan. His 7 closest advisors. Take a look in the pasuk on the side, right? Can you see the pasuk on the side? V'akarov elav, right over here. Vav. Kashena shetar admata tarshish meres marsena memuchan. Shiv'at sarei paras umadai. Ro'ei penei hamelech hayoshvim rishonav malchut. The 7 top princes and advisors in the kingdom, and these are the names of those people. Now, he asks these 7 advisors for advice as to what to do with Vashti. Okay. Now the Gemara takes a sidebar. Hold up. Literal interpretation means that he was asking them exactly this point. But if you remember, V'hakarov elav, those that were closest to him, says Rabbi Levi, no. Hakarov elav means from an expression of a korban. That which was brought to him. The Malachim in Shamayim came to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and said, come on, his advisors, Yani. God's advisors. Where do we find that Malachim are related to as in an advisory capacity?
Where?
In Bereshit. Where God says to Moshe, to the angels, right, let us make man. And the Gemara says, let us, what are the other gods? Answers the Gemara, no, of course there's no other gods. But God is showing us that the wisest in the group is always supposed to ask advice from his underlings. Don't just be the one-man show, decide everything by yourself. You should take counsel from those around you, even if they're less than you. That means that they are his advisors. So who was Karov Elav, says Rabbi Levi. Now each one of these expressions is going to be an abbreviated word. Okay, where the first part and the second part is going to kind of make 2 words. Karshena, Amru Melech HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The angel said in front of God, did they bring in front of you karim, which is lambs, b'nei shana that are 1-year-old? Take a look at the words karim, shana, karshena. Okay, so the Jewish people, how could you let them be destroyed by these people? Are they like karshena? The next one, like the Jewish people brought before you. Shetar, kelu mikrivu lefanecha, shte torim, shete torim. Shete is the first 2 letters, and tafresh is the next 2 letters. Shte torim. Do they bring to you the 2 turtle doves of the korbanot that the Jewish people would bring? Admata, do they make for you a mizbeach out of adama, like you said in the pasuk, mizbeach adama ta'aseli? Hashem says, make me a altar made of earth. The earth-filled mizbeach was actually copper covered, but the inside was hollow, and they would carry it around and fill it up with the earth of the place in which they were staying. Okay, so admata. Kilun banu lefanecha mizbeach adama. They build in front of you a mizbeach from earth. Tarshish klum shimshu lefanecha bebegdei keuna. Did they serve in front of you in the begadim of the Kohen Gadol? The Kohen Gadol had 12 different stones. The bottom line of the stones was Tarshish, right? Shoham and Yashveh. So Tarshish is the name of a specific stone. Did they come with Tarshish? Interesting question. Why he brought all of these specific elements of the korbanot and not any others. But be that as it may, Rabbi Levi continues. Meres, what's meres? Kelum meresu bedam lefanecha. Did they ever stir the blood? What does it mean, stirring the blood? So the Kohanim, when they would have the blood, they would take the blood and put it on the mizbeach. But what if they were sacrificing thousands or hundreds of thousands of korbanot? Sometimes you'd have a line to be able to put the dam on the mizbeach. In the Beit HaMikdash, they solved this problem. How did they solve the problem of Korban Pesach is the biggest time, because the Korban has to be brought at the same time, and every single Jewish family has to have one. Imagine hundreds of thousands of korbanot. And you have to wait to put the blood on the Mizbeach. So the Gemara says initially, the Kohanim created a system where they would line up and they would have this system where they would be taking the keli sharet with the blood from the korban and the empty one back, and they were going like this. And the Gemara says that they got it down so fast, they were able to move fast enough that you could not see their hands moving. That's how fast they were doing this thing. Even Elon Musk would not have fired them from Tesla's production plant line. Says the Gemara, Meres, did they ever mix it? So what happened? If the blood would, why they have to move so fast? Because the blood, if you leave blood, what happens? The coagulants in blood make the blood become hard, and then you can't do zrika. So what did they do? They had to move it very, very quickly. And if they couldn't move it quickly enough, they would mix the blood, either stir it or they would move it around, etc., etc. The cups that held the blood, by the way, had no bottom. Why? Because if you put it down, it coagulates faster. So they were like cones. And that way, imagine a champagne flute with no leg. And that was what it looked like. And they would mix it around, and they'd have to hold it, have to move it. How did they solve the problem of too much blood to be on the Mizbeach? Genius. Shlomo HaMelech sanctified the entire floor of the Beit HaMikdash. So long as a little bit of blood even touched the floor of the Beit HaMikdash, it was as if they had sprinkled the blood on the Mizbeach, which is the Avodah Zrika, and the Korban was kosher. So at that point already, where they could use the floor and they didn't need to worry about getting to the Mizbeach, already it was less of a problem. So the Gemara asked, did they ever mix the blood for you? For the korbanot? Marsena comes from the same expression. Kulam mirsu b'menachot lefanecha. Did they ever stir or mix the menachot? The menachot are made out of flour and oil. Always made out of flour and oil. The only difference between the minchat marcheshet, minchat marvat, minchat rikikim, all these different menachot, the difference between them was only in how you prepared the mixture after it was mixed. But did they ever mix the mincha in front of you? Says the Gemara, mimuchan. Did they ever arrange the shulchan in front of you? What was the shulchan? The shulchan was the showbread table in the Beit HaMikdash that had on it, what did it have on it always? The shulchan? Correct, the lechem hapanim, designed to look like a U. Okay, so the bread looked like this. It would stay on the shulchan from week to week and stay fresh when you removed it on Friday afternoon, even though it was a week old. So if Wonder Bread is not careful, we'll sue him. Okay, Gemara continues.
The whole layout of that paragraph. What are they trying to say?
Super simple.
Did they do this?
Super simple. Rabbi Levi is saying this portion. It sounds like Achashverosh is asking advice from his advisors. But we've already established this idea that whenever the Megillah says the word Hamelech, it refers not to the king Achashverosh. It refers to the King of Kings, Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So the Melech turned to his advisors, to the angels. And what did the angels say to defend the Jews? What, you're going to allow this to take place, this turn of events where Vashti's going to go and then Haman's going to give the advice, and then he's going to be promoted for that advice, and then they're going to be in danger? What are you doing? The Jewish people, look at all the things that they did that the nations of the world never did. So all these things stand in their favor. And the Gemara brings Kar Shena, Karim Shana, Shetar, Shtetorim, Meres, Mirsu. Yes.
Were they advocating for the savior of the Jews, the ultimate savior of the Jews? Were they advocating that the Chachamim not get involved and give Achashverosh the advice?
They were advocating that Vashti should never be killed, or they were advocating that that the advice should not come from Mimuchan, that's Haman. Okay, so they were advocating for any path other than Haman getting into the seat of power, and that happening through this story. The Gemara continues, V'yom Mimuchan, and Mimuchan said, Mimuchan, Tana Mimuchan. We learned in the Mishnah that Mimuchan and Braita that Mimuchan is Haman. V'lam nekra shemo Mimuchan. Why is his name called Mimuchan if his name is really Haman? Shemuchan lepuranut, because he's prepared to be punished. One opinion means that Haman was prepared to be punished, i.e., he was ready to get punished himself in the punishment that befalls Haman. But the other opinion says, no, it doesn't mean that he was prepared for punishment, but rather he was prepared as a tool for punishment. Why am I saying that opinion, even though that opinion seems less straightforward in the Gemara? The answer is because we have a very specific teaching, that the Gemara tells us that Amalek is always as a stick, muchan lepuranut. It is as a stick waiting, so to speak, by God, where if ever the troubles need to come, they're a stick waiting to be used for Puranut. So when you find a descendant of the illustrious Amalekite clan coming along, and his name is Memuchan, and the Gemara tells us Muchan the Puranut, it makes sense that it fits the same version of Amalek as Muchan, like a stick, Muchan the Puranut, to hit us, not to get hit. Okay, and that's why I'm following the second opinion of the Maharsha and the Gemara. Let's continue. Amar Rav Kana says, "Mekanshe idiot kofetz barosh." Here you see that it's the idiot that speaks up first, the simple man, the uneducated, the uncouth that speaks up first. Why? Because Haman, when was he listed in the numbers in the 7? Last. Vayomer Memuchan, and Memuchan speaks. We didn't hear from Karshena, Shetar, Admata. None of them said anything. Memuchan jumped ahead of everybody. Genius. So always, it is the boor, it is the one that doesn't have the derech eretz that jumps and speaks in front of those that are more chashuv than him. Says the Gemara, liot kol ish sorer bebeto. By the way, I always thought to myself that it's interesting to me that they never notate that his name is Memuchan because he's prepared. Muchan means prepared. The king asks a question. That's your shot. Shoot your shot. That's why he's called Memuchan. Because he jumps for the shot. He tries to position himself first. By the way, who's the great-great-great-great-grandfather of Haman?
Esav?
Esav. We know that Yaakov was actually created first. What did Esav do? Jumped in front of him. He was already Memuchan. Not only that, what is Esav's name? Esav means pre-made, asui. He came out full of air.
Right.
So he's also Muchan. Why? Because the concept of Amalek and a Rasha is, I'm already done. I have no more growing to do. I'm finished. And therefore, the person is never trying to challenge himself to grow. So the nature of Amalek, of Esav, ties into the actual name of Memuchan. Says the Gemara, to every single person should rule in his own house. Now, let me just give you the context again. What happens? Vashti humiliates Achashverosh. He calls all the people, all of his advisors together. The advisors say, kill Vashti. And put out a proclamation.
The advisors do or Memuchan does?
Memuchan, okay? Kill Vashti. And put out a proclamation to all the people in the kingdom that every man should rule in his own house, okay? And the language that's spoken in the house should be the language of the husband. Clear? That's the advice that Memuchan gives Achashverosh when he tells him to put out a proclamation from this story. Says the Gemara.
Oh, I was going to say, don't you see the end of the story where Haman's wife tells him, you're going to let that guy go? And she really is she tells him the answer. She says, you're going to let that guy go? You should go out and do it, no?
What do you mean?
He asked the opinion of his wife.
I don't know what you mean when you say she said you should go and do it.
When at the end of the story, before the party, Haman comes home and he tells Zerah, says, you're going to let Mordechai do something? Doesn't she push him to go out and do something?
He says, I hate this guy Mordechai. He's driving me crazy. He doesn't bow to me. So she says to him, so kill him. Have him killed.
She's the leader of the house.
Yep. Look, it's always the people that suffer from something at home that project it onto everybody else, isn't it? Okay, let's carry on. So the Gemara says, very interesting. So he puts out this proclamation. Now, the Gemara is pointing out, that's a very strange proclamation to put out. And the Gemara says that there was no mistake. Let's read. Amar Rava says, Ilmale igrot rishonot, if not for the fact that there were these original letters that went out, lo nishtayem misonen she'Yisrael saridu palit. The enemies of the Jews, we already said this many times, whenever it says the enemies of the Jews, who does it actually mean? The Jews. We just don't want to say something bad will happen to us, so we use that euphemism of the enemies of, but we mean, so if not for the first letters going out, the Jewish people would not have survived. Not a sarid palit, there would not have been even a leftover, not one person, not one refugee, not one escapee. Right? Why? Amri, they got that first letter. They asked themselves, "My hay deshadelan." What is this king sending us? This ridiculous letter. Liot kol ish sorer beto, that every man should rule his house. What does he think he is? Living in San Francisco in 2023? Pshita. Afilu karcha bebete. Even the simplest weaver in his house, the lowest position, on the totem pole of workers, right? He rules his own house. In his own house, pardashcha leheve. He's an authority. He's the ruler. You need the king to rule, to give this psak halacha, okay, that everyone should rule in their house. So therefore, what did they think to themselves? Hada Majnun.
Right.
What happened? Now they got the second letter. Second letter says, guys, in 11 months from now, next year, on the 13th day of the month of Adar, we're going to destroy all the Jews. Ordinarily, if they had not gotten the first letter, what would they have done? The next morning, kill him. Why? Why did they kill him the next morning? Number one, anti-Semitism. Number two,
It's an edict.
no. Only Syrians care about edicts.
Why would they?
Who said maybe high blow? Yeah.
Medium.
Was the
You forgot the end of the sentence. On the 13th day of the month of Adar, kill all the Jewish people. Ushlalam lavos, and their booty to be taken.
Oh.
You kill the Jew, you get his house, you get his car. So which dib is going to wait a whole year so someone else could take Rothschild's house? Kill the guy tonight. But what happened? Now they got the first letters. They think to themselves, the guy is whacked out of his head. Who knows? If I kill the guy today, what's the letter going to come out tomorrow saying, actually just kidding, Not only that, I think there's more here. What they untook from this is that, what do you mean? Every man rules his house. What they see Achashverosh as, if he needed to say that out loud? The man should rule his house.
That he's insecure.
But he's
not-
weak.
Weak.
He's weak. So if this king is weak, who knows if at some point later something's going to change? Maybe he won't last. Maybe I'll get punished for it. You know what? Better to be safe than sorry. I'll wait till the 13th day of the month of Adar. I could wait a year to kill the Jews. No problem. I'll just make sure to camp outside the house. Okay? So the Gemara says, effectively telling us that when Haman sent out this declaration, it had the effect of saving the Jewish people by creating a feeling of insecurity in the people that would have done us harm. Says the Gemara, and the king, he sent out messengers. What does it mean? He sent out messengers. Amar Rav says, what does it mean to say when it says in the pasuk, Kol arum yaseh b'dat, a wise person, a clever, a cunning person does things with knowledge, with wisdom, v'chsil, and a simple person, yifros ivelet, he spreads out all his idiocy, all his stupidity. Okay? What does that mean? Kol arum yaseh b'dat. When it comes to wise people doing with wisdom, who's that referring to? Zeh David. That refers to David. Because David has a remarkably similar situation. At the end of his life, David HaMelech is freezing cold. Nothing will warm him. He needs to get married again. What does he do? He gets to marry, or what does he do to get warm? Because he cut the beged of Shaul. What does he need to do? David, he needs someone to warm him who's has body heat, okay? And he needs someone that's young, who generally they run hotter, they exude more heat than someone that's older because they have better blood flow. So
They needed to heat him.
he was freezing cold. His clothing would not keep him warm. David HaMelech shaking from the cold at the end of his life. Why? Because he earlier had cut off the corner of the clothing of Shaul HaMelech to prove a point. And the Gemara says, quoting the pasuk, "Habaz ledavar yechavelo." When you treat something, with disrespect, you're mezalzel in something. Yechavelo comes back to hurt you. So you didn't treat clothing with respect, no problem. Clothing's not going to work for you. Wow. So his clothing, anything he would use to keep warm, didn't keep him warm. So he's shaking and he's old and his wife has passed away. They said to him, you should get a young woman and she should become your wife and then she'll be able to hold you and to keep you warm, okay? Listen to what happens. Similar. Vayomru lo avadav, and his servant said to him, Yivakshu la Adoni HaMelech, they should search out for our master, the king, Na'ara betula, a young maiden girl, virgin maiden girl. Okay? Now, over here, Achashverosh has his advisors tell him, Yafker HaMelech Pekidim, he advised, according to their advice, he sends out messengers to go out and get the Na'ara betula, and David HaMelech, same thing. Nice. Answers the Gemara, that's the difference. When it came to David HaMelech, Kol man dahav lebarta, anyone who had a daughter, brought them They brought their daughter to David HaMelech that she should become his wife. Why? Because what did he say? They said, get for yourself a Na'ara. Seek out a one. So yes, you have to go through many, right, to see which one is going to be the one. But the point is to have one. Go bring one. Search as much as you like, but bring me one. By Achashverosh, it was the opposite. But a fool, he spreads out his stupidities and he lets everybody know. What Achashverosh say? He set out Pekidim. Read the whole pasuk on the side. You'll see it over here. 3 lines from the bottom in the whole pasuk. Across all the kingdoms across all the countries of his kingdom. They were gathering every virgin girl, Tovat Mareh, that was beautiful, to the harem of the king. They were giving it to the head of the harem, and he was giving them all their perfumes or whatever they needed. So the proclamation was, bring me every girl. What is every father going out to do? Itmeremine is hiding him because they heard that he's gathering all the girls. What's that going to mean? That's going to mean that he's going to bring all. What does he need to bring all the girls there for? The answer is he's going to be with everyone. Then he's going to choose which one he wants to be with. What does that mean? Once the king has been with this girl, she's now, not only she violated, she can no longer be with anybody else. Because it's an embarrassment to the king that the woman that the king slept with should be slept with by a commoner or by anyone else. So they waited, all these thousands or however many, tens of thousands of women, waited in the harem of the king. If he would call them by their name, then they would come. Otherwise, they sat there condemned with golden handcuffs to the life in the harem of the king. So it says the pasuk, you see, when it came to David, he sent out, he used his wisdom to be able to achieve what he wanted to achieve. And here, Achashverosh, not thinking this through, created for himself a difficult job in as much that everyone who had a daughter was hiding their daughter from him. Well, let's continue next week, this next portion. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen. Sorry?
Tuesday night?